Здравствуйте, дам. Yeah, let's try that one more time. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back to another episode of In the Eyes of Truth, the English edition. I'm doing that more to remind myself which language I'm talking in this today. With us is back again, Drago Bosnic.
Hey there, entrepreneurs. Are you feeling the squeeze from increasing regulations and higher taxes? Maybe you've noticed the growing instability and thought there has to be a better way. Well, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to consider offshoring your wealth now. Imagine a life where your hard-earned money isn't constantly under threat from unpredictable government policies. Sounds pretty good, right? Let me tell you. It's not just a dream, it's a smart strategy. Here at Exit Strategy, we specialize in helping entrepreneurs like you protect and grow their wealth. We navigate the complex world of international finance so you don't have to, from setting up offshore accounts to advising on the best countries with favorable tax laws. We've got you covered. Now, I know what you're thinking. Offshoring sounds risky, maybe even a bit shady, but the truth is many savvy business owners are already doing it. It's not just about dodging taxes, it's about creating a safety net for your future. Imagine diversifying your assets across multiple jurisdictions. When one country faces economic downturns, your wealth remains secure. Think of it as an insurance policy against the uncertainties of life. And let's not forget, having a portion of your wealth offshore can open up opportunities for international investments. You're no longer limited by the economic climate of a single country. You can tap into booming markets around the world, maximizing your returns. But here's the kicker. Time is of the essence. With increasing global scrutiny and tightening regulations, the window for easy offshoring is closing fast. The sooner you act, the better positioned you'll be. So why wait? Protect your wealth, secure your future, and explore new opportunities with Exit Strategy. Don't let the rising dangers in the US economy catch you off guard. Reach out to us today and take the first step towards financial freedom. Because when it comes to your wealth, playing it safe is the riskiest move of all. Thanks for watching, and remember, your future starts with the decisions you make today. Choose wisely, choose Exit Strategy. Catch you in the next video.
Straight out of Belgrade, straight out of Compton, where the Soros crowd is having their fun. So, Drago,
Yeah, it's
fill us
great being
in.
here. It's great being here, of course. Yeah, as people who are following me probably know that I'm not from Belgrade, but I'm in Belgrade now. I have a bunch of these interviews and meetings and so on. And of course, we have the protests here in Belgrade, and the issue with that, of course, is that it serves to destabilize the country further by foreign powers. And also, our government is sometimes, making errors, as they say, by voting, against Russia, which only riles up the nationalists, who then also might join the protests because of such things. But the real issue is that the country is pretty much, well, I'm not going to say it's going to collapse, but our education system has been pretty much dead for the last 5 months because of these protests. And there are people who are going to have to pay, for their education because they're not going to get scholarships because they lost a year. So it's a mess. It's a mess. Well, of course, we're doing our best to prevent any damage to the country. Our situation is so complex. It would take like 2 hours to explain it, but I think most people understand that Serbia is surrounded by NATO, and we have to work with them, to prevent them from pretty much crushing us in 3 days. So, the government is trying to play this extremely dangerous game on a knife's edge, essentially, and trying to keep the good relations with Russia and BRICS, but also trying to, be in the West good graces in order to prevent any, direct attacks. But, it's never enough because the West now it's all black and white. Like you're either with us or you're against us. Like you can't be neutral. You can't be anything else except pro NATO. So that's the biggest issue for us right now.
You'd think if you really wanted to play a game better, you'd Vucic would be helping in the Romanian upcoming revolution, get Grigorescu into power. Um,
Yeah, although I don't think he wants to get involved with that because, we have very good relations with Romania, and he's trying to keep it, keep us out of the internal political situation because, it could create even more problems. So I think that's the reason why he doesn't want to get involved.
well, revolutions in Europe have a tendency of coming in waves.
Yeah,
So if we see the Grigorescu come to power, I mean, he is now, there is no democracy or anything that even hints of democracy or hell democracy. I don't even like democracy, but there's no hint of a republican system in Romania anymore.
yeah, it's a dictatorship. I mean, the EU itself is a dictatorship. And there are, of course, there are people who are not like part of that, like Orban, for example. But the vast majority of EU member states are pretty much provinces of the Brussels, and they follow the orders of, let's say, the anti-Trump deep state that has actually entrenched itself in the rest of NATO minus the United States, because now Trump is trying to build his own deep state in America. So
Well,
there's
he's
a
got his
clash.
own deep state in America. What are you talking about?
Yeah, of course, but he's trying to purge all these others from the anti-Trump deep state. So there's
Ah,
like, I
that
mean,
true.
it's pretty obvious that there's almost like a civil war within the federal system, and it's a quiet, soft civil war. It's not a direct one, but there are indicators of it. And of course, the issue is the deep state that was running the United States until January 20th came to Europe and decided to entrench itself in Europe, and now they're suffocating any signs of opposition. They are trying everything they can against Slovakia, against Hungary. They're trying to suffocate any opposition in Romania. They try to do it in Georgia, but of course, Georgia is not part of the EU, so that's much harder to do. But anyway, they want to make sure there's complete order and obedience in their ranks.
But look, in its own way, it seems like the Austro-Hungarian Empire is reforming itself. Because if you look at the type of government that just came in power in Austria, then you flip over, there's Hungary, and then there's Slovakia. You get this core of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire that's reforming in its
Yeah.
own wake, plus its own cultural view.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the Visegrad group without Poland is pretty much like the former Hungarian Empire. The only thing left in that regard is I presume it's the Czech Republic, but they still have like a liberal government in power, and that's going to go hard. But at least, for now there are, well, at least two countries that are not falling in line, and that's Slovakia and Hungary.
Well,
And
Austria,
if Yeah, Austria too. Although Austria is not a NATO member. Yeah, but it
but
is
it's
a
an
EU.
EU member,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
worse,
exactly.
which
And
I think is much worse these days.
yeah, it is. Yeah, well, realistically speaking, it is. And if Georgescu gets the election, which I'm not sure if it's going to happen. I really hope he does win the election in Romania, because
He's been
then,
banned from being in the elections.
yeah, I know.
So it's
It's just I'm
revolution.
hoping. Yeah, like I was hoping that the Romanians are going to actually protest, because that's a protest I would support, because it is a protest of sovereigntists. It's not a protest that will be supported by Soros, because obviously they support the government, which is trying to persecute Georgescu. And but I think there's going to be a pushback in Romania. There's no way that the Romanians, who, because they mostly voted for him, that they're just going to let it slide like this. He's the most popular candidate, and he actually gained popularity because of all this. So there's sort of like this Trump effect in Romania right now. But we'll see how determined the protesters will be to ensure that their candidate actually wins, and that he purges the deep state from Romania. That would be the best possible thing for Romania, because from what I can gather, they are being prepared to be the next cannon fodder after Ukraine,
Oh yeah,
either
absolutely.
them or Poland. So, or both at the same time. Like, NATO will push as many countries against Russia as possible. And of course, Romania is a pretty big country. I mean, in terms of other countries in Central Europe. So Romania and then Poland are the most important NATO members in Eastern Europe. if we don't count Greece and Turkey, but they're already the southeastern wing anyway. So, but in the eastern wing, Romania and Poland are crucial. Not to mention like these Devuso, so-called the anti-ballistic missile bases, which are pretty much offensive weapons, masquerading as anti-ABM systems. So Romania, they're not going to give up Romania that easily because of the strategic importance of Romania for NATO.
True, true. But if everything goes well and there is a revolution in Romania, um, it's going to spread. But the question is, in
Oh
which
yeah,
direction? So you got Bulgaria, which is kind of got a president that's kind of pro relations with Russia, kind of not, but not hostile, but a parliament that's very hostile. You got
yep,
Greece, which is a just a protectorate, basically, without any will and say of its own. So it's an occupied territory. And
yep.
then you've got
Greeks
what
are
you,
furious.
yeah, you got Macedonia, which isn't here or there. Albania, there's a wave of areas that could go pop very loudly.
Although I doubt Albania would go into any sort of revolution that's going to be anti-NATO. Like they're firmly in the NATO camp. Like,
Yeah.
but Greece is not another story. Like the Greeks, I when I talk to Greeks, they're freaking furious. Like they're furious at their government because they provided weapons to the Kiev regime, but despite the fact that like 95% of Greeks didn't want it. And the point is, the Greeks got the information what was happening to the Greeks who live in the Donbass and in Crimea.
Yeah.
So those are people who are being shelled by the Ukrainian army. And then the Greek government sends weapons to those who are killing native Greeks in the area.
Yeah.
So of course they were furious at the government. But as you said, that government is pretty much like a colonial I don't know. Um, the governor essentially, like the prime minister is the colonial governor of Greece, and Greece is it doesn't have like maybe has like I don't know 30% of sovereignty or even less, because I mean it's mindless that you have a neighbor like Turkey, but you're disarming yourself to arm people who are killing your people in Russia. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, t Turkey and Greece, they make sure that neither one of them will ever leave NATO. While NATO exists, because if one leaves NATO, then everybody will be on the other one's side. So that's at
Oh
least a
yeah.
guarantee that those two will always be around in NATO.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose that because of the importance of Turkey, because I mean, Turkey is geopolitically speaking, Asia Minor is probably the most important area in the world because you can project power literally everywhere from there. You can project it in Eastern Europe, in Southern Europe, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in the Caucasus, maybe even Central Asia if we count like the Caucasus area.
Hmm.
So I think that NATO will never leave Turkey, and Turkey will not leave NATO because it's very useful for them. They can always like if they screw up, they can always go back, to Brussels and say, "Oh, you're a member, defend us," like they did in 2015 when they shot down the Russian Su-24M, and then they went, squealing to NATO that NATO needs to protect them from Russia. So
Yeah, the Turks have well, we fought what about 13 official wars with Turkey, with the
yeah,
uh, Ottoman Empire, which is interesting because if you ever read history according to a Westerner, uh, it's the West that's been fighting the Ottoman Turks. The Hungarians, the Hungarian Empire, the Albanians when they were actually Christian. Well, some of them still are, and so on and so on. The Poles came charging in. Never mind, half their army was Russians from southern Lithuanian principality, like Smolensk, areas like that. But we'll ignore that part. But out of 13 wars, how many wars did we lose to the Turks?
I think one or two, right?
Two.
Two.
One, if you can call it a war, it was Peter the Great was
Yeah, he
surrounded
was
by the
attacked by the
Turks.
Swedes,
Yeah, because he was
right?
chasing the Swedes down, and Charles I got my ass kicked, and I ain't exactly great anymore. Was running for his life. Well, he actually wasn't running; he was wounded in the leg, so he's being carried for his life with what was left of his pathetic horde south into Turkey, and the Russian army hot in pursuit. And the Russian army gets surrounded, and that was kind of a war. I guess the Turks got to count something. Um, After getting their teeth kicked in constantly by Russia. That was one, and the other one was
The Crimean War, 1853, 1855, right?
right. And who did most of the dying in that one?
Well, it wasn't even the Turks. It was the French and the Sardinians. Actually, I mean, before
And
Italy
the
was
British.
formed, and the British, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even count that one. So it's really it's not really it's actually zero because every single war that Russia was fighting against Turkey alone, Turkey would have never had the chance to win. And the point is like the Russian military was always far more advanced than the Turkish one, and especially let's say during the Suvorov era, Suvorov and Ushakov pretty much kicked their asses like I don't know for 50 years straight. The siege of Ismail, for example, I think that's a good example of how you can take a fortress which was considered impregnable with a lower number of people, like I don't know, 40% of the army that was defending, and you win with very little casualties, and the other side is completely decimated. So I advise
Well, no,
people to
it's
look
not
up that battle.
decimated. Decimated is the wrong term. Decimated means every
Oh
10th
yeah,
one.
like
Annihilated.
wiped out, right?
Yeah, annihilated.
Annihilated. I advise people to look up that battle. It's absolutely impressive. And Suvorov is one of the guys, one of the I think seven generals who never lost a battle, like not a single battle. Like one of the seven generals in history that who actually won every single battle he led.
Well, you can go back in history a little further to Ion Grozny, Ion the Fourth, the Battle of
Yeah,
Maladoy, which is it was buried by the Romanovs because they were trying to portray Ion Grozny in a bad light, and he had a few things, but by the way, he never killed his son, even though there's a liberal who did a painting. The painting's well done, but it's absolute BS.
yeah,
Uh,
it's not true. It's
yeah,
based on Jesuit lies about Ivan.
right. Ion the Great.
Yeah,
No, Ion the Great was
yeah.
actually his grandfather, but Ion Vasilievich the Fourth. They had a tendency.
The
It was
fourth. Yeah,
Ion Vasilievich, Vasily Ionovich, and they're going back and forth for a while. I don't know. Couldn't get more creative, I guess.
he was also partially Serbian. I
Uh,
think his grandmother was was a Serbian princess, something like that. I mean, the point about him is that he was one of the best leaders of Russia. But this is like the interesting thing. Whenever Russia has a strong leader, they tend to smear him throughout, in historiography, just to ensure that he looks like a madman, like a crazy person. But the point is, I mean, he doubled Russia's territory.
oh
He
yeah,
defeated most of the enemies. And the point about his so-called madness. I'm not saying that the guy was like all nice and dandy, but the point is he wasn't the monster that he's being portrayed as.
hmm
He was just a very strong leader, and I think the name the so-called translation of his name Grozny, which is terrible, that's a mistranslation because at the time when it was used, it meant mighty. So like
feared,
in modern
feared.
Russian, he would be Ivan Silny, right? Uh,
No, well,
so
no, no.
pretty much
Grozny means feared.
fear, yeah, like
Yeah,
fear, like
everybody,
someone
all
who
his enemies
instills
feared him.
fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It
So
the
yeah,
the interesting thing is in Maladoy, the Crimean Khaganate sent in an army of about 30,000 plus Turkish janissaries. There weren't that many of them, but they were there. They got wiped out by an army that's less than half their size.
yep.
So
I mean, this
wiped
myth
out.
of Russia sending like waves of unarmed peasants, whatever, and then winning battles like that. It mostly comes from World War II era, and even that was based on lies because the vast majority of casualties that the Soviet Union had were either civilians or soldiers who were POWs and then they got shot. So when you really calculate the numbers, the number of the German soldiers who died in the battles and the number of Soviet soldiers who died in battles, like in actual fighting, it's pretty close. Like it's one to
Yeah.
one. It's very close to 1-to-1. And but you still have these myths of Germans killing like I don't know 20 Soviet soldiers per German who died, and it's all this bullshit about the superior Wehrmacht that was just. defeated by the numbers of the Red Army, which is ridiculous because in the Battle of Moscow, you had the Siberians who were actually outnumbered by the Central Powers, I mean the Axis powers, and they still got pushed like 200 kilometers to the west. So I think it was 800,000 Siberians, something like that, right?
Hmm.
Who defeated an army of over a million, like million and a half German soldiers. So I mean, so much for being outnumbered 10 to 1 by the Russians.
Well, in those areas, first of all, it's not a total myth. At the beginning of World War II, uh, on average, three Westerners or five Russian soldiers died for every German soldier, and it wasn't because of the quality of the soldiers; it was because of the quality of officers. The problem is for the
Yep,
Germans, A, Russians learn fast, B, German officers die too. So by the end of World War II, by 1944-45, it was flipped, where there was a lot more
yep,
Germans dying per Russian soldier. Because, but you're right, out of about 7.5 million Soviet soldiers that died, almost 3 million of them died in captivity from the people that
exactly. Three
surrendered
million
in
of them were
19,
shot to death.
yeah,
Yeah, in
shot,
concentration
starved,
camps
murdered.
and
And that was
yeah,
almost all between 1941 and 1942. The Germans just,
exactly. The vast majority was in the early. But the point is, they count the POWs in the grand scheme, and then they
right,
say, oh,
right,
like we were more superior. But the point is, if when you capture a soldier, he's no longer a combatant. Like
right.
that's it. I mean, the Geneva Convention says that he's pretty much like almost like a civilian. You have to feed him, you have to make sure that he stays alive. But of course, we know what the Germans did,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
of course, this is where also the myth of the clean Wehrmacht comes into play, where they were saying, oh, it was only the SS that was doing the killing. Wehrmacht was all nice and dandy.
Yeah.
That's not true because the
Nope.
vast majority of civilians in the Soviet Union, in Serbia and Poland, who got killed were actually killed by the Wehrmacht. I mean, they didn't have enough SS units to kill 27 million people. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous,
yeah.
Like
Well,
it would have been impossible.
it was also an interesting thing why the Germans went into concentration camps instead of mass executions. Um, First of all, the SS was a pan-European army. We already had one pan-European army. It was
Oh
called
yeah,
the SS. Almost every nationality had. I mean, hell, out of Poland, there were 60,000 people, and now not all of them were Polish Germans. Not even half.
only Serbs and Greeks didn't have SS units.
There was even a Russian brigade. That was called a division, but one
Yeah.
Russian brigade in the SS, and they got wiped out too. But there were certain units that were very good at mass executions. The Lithuanians, the
The
Galician,
Croats.
no, the Croats, the Croats, SS, the Croat SS had a little bit of a misfortune south of Stalingrad when they got exterminated. Um, no prisoners taken. Whoops. Um,
Whoops. I
yeah,
would cry if I didn't, I would cry if I liked Nazis.
yeah. Oh, and the Galicians, the Western Ukrainians, they stood in battle once.
Yeah.
They got wiped against the Red Army, and then they got pulled, what was left of them got pulled back, and they became concentration camp guards. They're really good at that.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah. Like all these Nazis are extremely brave when it comes to murdering, kids and children and babies and elderly and women who all of whom were unarmed. But even when they push back, they flee, which they proved. When they actually met actual armies that were fighting the Nazis. And all of this, and the interesting thing is, when they talk about the Holocaust in the West, they hijack the term and they only put the Jews in that category.
oh yeah,
But the
yeah,
point is, the Holocaust was targeted against Slavs just as much as it was targeted against the Jews, because
oh yeah,
you had this so-called Generalplan Ost that was pretty much that slated like I don't know 80% of all Slavs in Eastern Europe to be exterminated, including the Western Ukrainians and the Croats who were fighting for the German army. And that was an interesting thing. Like I think they had like 10%. They wanted to keep like 10% of the Croatian population, and like maybe 5 or 10% of the Ukrainian population. So these people were actually fighting for their own extermination without realizing it. In the end, it was the Russian army that saved them from the
Yeah.
extermination, despite the fact that they were fighting it.
Yeah, Russians, they're supposed to have been west of the Urals, about 20 million people left as slaves.
Yeah.
Field slaves, factory slaves, household slaves,
And
But
they were also planning to sterilize them, like to ensure that they don't even survive after that.
our problem is we don't make very good slaves. We tend to kill the people that try to make us slaves.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. You're not democratic enough, man.
no, 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 we're not. We're not. We're so anti-democratic. I'm a monarchist. What the hell can I say? I mean, No, I'm serious. I'm a constitutional monarchist, flat out,
Yeah, well,
and not ashamed of it
I
in the
would
least.
say, I would say I'm too. I'm too. Like for most of my years, I supported monarchy, not the absolute monarchy, obviously, but the constitutional one. And all these revolutions, in my opinion, all these revolutions, including the October Revolution, was designed to screw up Russia and
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
its allies, including Serbs. Like we suffered because of the October
Oh
Revolution
yeah, yeah.
later on. And of course, Russia suffered. And of course, I mean, I'm not, I would always support the Russian cause. I would support the Russian cause in World War II as well, because in my opinion, it wasn't the commies who defeated the Germans and the Nazis. It was the Russian people. Without the Russian people, like the ideology doesn't matter at all. It was the Russian people who actually fought and freed all of Eastern Europe. And people can, of course, complain about communism, and they can put, the communism on the same level as Nazism, which I don't agree with, because when the Soviet Union came to Eastern Europe, it didn't exterminate all of us, and the Germans. That's exactly what the Germans were planning to do. So communism had a bunch of flaws, but it was nowhere near the Nazis. Like those were the guys that they're being whitewashed all the time in the West. In the West, they keep
Hmm.
saying, "Oh, like we defeated the wrong enemy," blah blah blah. But the point is, people always forget what kind of people the Nazis were.
Well, the Nazis, if you look at it, National Socialism. Let's begin with that. Hitler talked quite a bit about capitalism. He despised capitalism. Let's not even. Yeah, it's they're right wing. The only thing that makes him quote right wing was they were racially based as opposed to class based,
Yeah,
and that was because I mean Ruhr wanted to destroy the upper class, the brown shirts, but Hitler, the black shirts, the Gestapo was able to buy them off. So there's no reason destroying him because they're already on your side. But they were using
yeah,
race, which, by the way, all the liberals now, all the left uses race-based now. They
yeah.
were ahead of their times. It's you may be you may be rich, but you're a minority, so you're an oppressed minority. That so you have a right to even if you're rich or you're poor, then you get your rights to revenge against that majority. So they were just ahead of their time. If you really look at it the way it's gone now, there was nothing
Oh yeah,
right
yeah. They,
wing
they
about
just
them.
flipped it on their head.
Yeah, there
They,
was
they just
really.
flipped the ideology on its head. But in essence, that is that ideology. And the fact that just like the Nazis were extremists, just look at liberals. Like, do you see a sane person when you see a neoliberal? Well, I don't, because like the way they behave, the way they think, like no sane person would ever accept that. And I think the worst thing is it's almost like a trained mental disease.
It
Like you
is.
train yourself into becoming mentally ill, and you were completely healthy before that. It's a very very dangerous ideology.
I lived in a communal apartment for a while. There's four of us, four bedrooms. The only thing we each had our own bathroom. And one of the guys that was living there, he got divorced. He was an engineer. Got divorced, decided to go into sales, and became an Amway salesman. And I fell asleep on the couch, and I wake up at 6 in the morning, and I can hear him brainwashing himself. He's got a disc in, and he's playing the disc, and the disc is, I'm going to be the best Amway salesman in the world. I'm going to be the best Amway salesman. I'm going to be the best. And after that chant's done, to be the best Amway salesman in the world, I must exclude everybody and all else outside my life, outside of Amway. To be the best Amway. And like, Jesus, it's a sect. And by the way, they make their money not off of toilet paper and toothbrushes, but off of selling these videos and these audios to suckers who aren't making the millions that they were promised. But it's a sect. And you listen to how
It
they're
is.
brainwashing themselves. These guys are brainwashing themselves the same way, just on
Yeah.
television.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. And the worst part is they infiltrated universities and the education system, and they have destroyed generations of Americans. I mean, I understand why people just went for Trump because he was something different. He's not perfect, like he has a million flaws, but the point is he's not as insane as these other people.
Yeah.
So, and this is why he's
Yeah.
so popular. Like I mean, we can't really call him a conservative. We can't even call any party in America conservative. What's conservative for Christ's sake? Like, oh, removing the T from the LGBT, now you're
Hey,
conservative?
they're
Oh, give
going
me a
back to the
break.
roots, baby. They've gone back to the
Yeah.
roots. That's concern.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's ridiculous. People are making memes like, "Oh, reject modernity, embrace tradition," and then there's just an LGB, right? It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I mean, the point is like you have to go all the way back. And you have to realize when was the moment you made the mistake of legalizing all these things. And the point is liberalism, it's a never-ending phenomenon. Like no matter how much you go to the left, as they say, or whatever the hell whatever the direction is for them, it's always going to need more. You're always going to need more. Like uh, if there is a trans person now, in 10 years it would be a pedophile or I don't know whoever. So that's why they would never stop. And that's why like people reacted in America and chose Trump. And Trump, the point is Trump didn't roll that back. He just, put a stop to going into total extremism.
Well, if you want to be a rebel in the West, a modern rebel, go to church, have a job, have a wife, have a couple kids, have a
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah. Yeah,
Be a
yeah.
rebel.
Be a rebel. Like the crazy thing is now that's considered a rebellion. Like that's a normal life. Like I don't know anyone in my community who doesn't want anything else but that. Like it's who wants anything else but that. Like it's crazy. Like that's something that was considered completely like that was considered the central position like just 30 or 40 years ago, even in America. And then
Yeah.
the liberals took over. They took over the media, they took over the education system, they took over the federal institutions, and now this is why we have all these things that we have in America. But that wouldn't be so problematic for the rest of the world if there weren't organizations like the NED, like the USAID, that were disseminating all this bullshit and
Yeah.
trying to brainwash the rest of us into becoming degenerates, essentially.
Well, that's the problem. When you're forcing, you have tyranny of the very small minority. And the only way to enforce what to most people is repulsive, is through absolute police state tyranny,
Yep.
like the UK.
Oh yeah, the UK. I mean, the UK is the birthplace of liberalism, and it was only a matter of time before they go into extreme neoliberal
Hmm.
ideology. And this is what they are. And I don't understand, like, how do people not see how suicidal that ideology is? So it's all about they're trying to convince their own people that getting millions and millions or dozens of millions of immigrants into your country is perfectly fine. At the same time, you should also go to war in Ukraine and get killed by Russian hypersonic missiles. That's what they're telling them, and that's what the military is preparing to do. Instead of defending their own country, ensuring the safety of their own country, they want to go to Ukraine to get fucking killed by the Russian military, which is bigger, like 10 times bigger on one third of the front in Ukraine than the entire British army is. So, and I mean, I recently saw this very interesting analysis by one of I forgot his name. He's like a historian and an analyst. He said he made this TV program about their navy. Right now, they have more admirals than warships. Like it's
Yeah.
it's it's ridiculous. Like, and they want to go to war with Russia. Like they have like four Vanguard class SSBNs. Two of those are not working. Like two of them are always on patrol, but two of them are always at the dock. So what are you going to fight Russia with? Like we're talking about a country with nearly 6,000 nuclear weapons, with dozens of submarines. I'm not even I'm not getting into the rest of it. Like it's the biggest arsenal in the world, and you want to fight such a country? What for? Well, your own country is falling apart.
Well, that's the whole point. To keep out of the way. So look, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Serbia. What do you think is going to happen? which direction is all of this running into?
Man,
Uh,
this is such a good question. It's $1 million question because I don't think we're gonna have like a coup or something. There's not enough people for that at the moment. Like most of those who protest now are younger people, and of course I'm not against them. I mean, they're my people. Like I cannot hate them or anything. The issue is many of them are simply seduced by these by the talk of better life and future because if we do what the West is asking us to do, if we get these reforms that are in line with the EU laws, it's all going to be nice and dandy. Well, I mean, we've been trying to
where's
do
that
that for
happened
20.
before?
Oh, well, oh yeah, nowhere. Like, just pick any country in the EU and you just look at their numbers, look at their demographics, look at their economic sovereignty. And I'm not talking about nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is like it's a freaking hoax. Like anyone can pretty much inflate their nominal GDP by borrowing money or something. But
Yeah.
the real economy and the real economy is measured in various ways, but one of the ways is to look at the GDP PPP or purchasing power parity. And if you look at that, most of the countries who are in the EU are economically devastated. So we cannot expect any future for Serbia in the EU. The only chance for us is Russia, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's by the way, Russia is what 3% of world GDP. Well, which is a lie because Russian assets have always been de priced in order to be able
Oh
to
yeah,
make them cheaper. Um, but even if it's 5% or 6%, it happens to be the 5 or 6% that produces things versus say like
exactly.
the US or the UK, which are these superpowers of finance that
Right,
manufacture
right.
very little anymore, especially the UK, which manufactures
Yeah,
almost nothing.
did you hear Rutte the other day, like maybe like a week or two ago, when he said Russia is producing 3 times more of various weapon systems than the entire NATO from Los Angeles to Ankara? How is that possible that a country that has the economy the size of Spain, as they keep saying, like it's less than like something like the size of Spain or Italy or something like that? How can a country that's supposedly like a shithole that doesn't produce anything, doesn't have any technology, how is that possible? Like they have a bunch of these narratives which are completely like illogical. Like you're saying that Russia is weak, it's losing in Ukraine, but now it wants to invade NATO? Like what the hell? Like
I'll
it
tell
makes
you
no
how it
sense.
is. We stole a lot of washing machines and drying machines out of Ukraine to make all of our missiles. I mean, in fact, some of the missiles, because you don't have enough time, you can actually see the washing machine on rinse cycle flying. Once it hits rinse, there's no going back. That's hypersonic,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. This is the impressive thing about the Russians. They can take the washing machines and put the chips in the missiles. They become hypersonic.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the secret, and that's because you stole the technology from Donald Trump. There was one
It was his
blueprint.
only copy, by the way, that we stole.
Exactly. There was only one blueprint, and the evil Russians took it, and that's why America doesn't have it anymore.
Well, I think it was the Chinese and they gave it over to us. Maybe it was the North Koreans that, when he was meeting with Kim Jong-un, they were picking his pocket at that moment. It works that way, baby. We got fingers. We got our little fingers everywhere.
Yeah,
We get your one
yeah,
copy, we'll burn your copy, and that's it, baby. That's it. I mean, that's how we got into space. We just stole the prints from the U.S. That's why the U.S. couldn't make it into space
exactly. And
first.
and of course, because everything the Russians make, it's always like in of lower quality, so you had more time to build the rocket before the Americans. Yeah, that's the reason.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, the stories the West tells itself.
Oh yeah, like these coping mechanisms are ridiculous. Like for example, when the drones, were starting to destroy the tanks, and then the Russians took the cope cages, and everybody was laughing at this. And 5 months later, you see every single big army in Europe and around the world, equipping its tanks with cope cages.
Yeah,
Like
the grills, the
it's
Mongol
ridiculous.
grills.
Right, right.
Yeah. First, well, no, actually, before everyone else started, the Israelis did it. Once the
Yeah,
Israelis got Hamas kicked them in the balls real hard, and then after, well, if the Israelis can do it, the master
anyone can do it.
race, then the Europeans will bow and do it themselves.
Yeah, but the issue is like these people in NATO, they think armies and militaries are like these fashion shows. They're not. Like, it's not about being pretty and looking good. It's about being functional. And every single Russian military entity in history, whether it was the Imperial Army, whether it was the Red Army, the Soviet Army, or the Russian Army today, it's always about functionality and robustness. Like, that's why Russia doesn't want to, build fancy things, because those things are not going to work in a war which is filled with the dirt and mud and God knows what else. You need something that's going to survive the brutal, conditions of the battlefield.
Drago.
And this is
I
why the Russian weapons dominate
I'm
everywhere.
sorry, we're out of time. We've got
Oh
like
yeah,
about
right.
20 seconds left. I want to thank everybody that joined us. If you have any questions for myself or for Drago, please leave them in the comments. We'll get them back to Drago so he can answer them. I hope peace will come sooner than later to peace and wisdom to the Serbian crowds in the streets.
Of course, of course.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, man.